Thank you, Fred. That's something I knew nothing about. To introduce our speaker today, we have somebody who might be somewhat closely related to her. Stan, if you could come up for introductions.
I have the pleasure of introducing my daughter, Stephanie, our speaker today, Stephanie DiGiulio. Her background a little bit, she has a master's degree, a bachelor's degree from Skidmore College, a master's degree from John Jay College of Criminal Justice. After graduate school, she worked for the federal court system, writing pre-sentencing reports for judges to help them decide what's an appropriate sentence for prisoners. And then she's raised 3 children, and she's just recently gone back into the workforce. And about 2 years ago, she began working as a 911 call taker for Wake County. And just recently, she was elected call taker of the year by her colleagues, her other call takers, and she's also employee of the year for the Wake County Emergency Services. So here is Stephanie.
Okay, I'll leave it on. Hi, my name is Stephanie DiGiulio, as my dad mentioned. This is my son, Dean. He's my youngest of 3 kids. And he is here supporting me, which I very much appreciate. Is that good? Okay. Is anyone zooming in? Oh, we have a couple zooming. Okay. Like my dad said, I'm 2 and change into this new career after being a stay-at-home mom for 17 years. My oldest is in college at NC State. Dean's my youngest going into high school. And then I've got my middle daughter who is a rising junior at Broughton High School. So we live in Raleigh. And then I've done a talk similar to this at Carolina Meadows, which I think all your residents really liked. So I'll follow kind of along with how I explain my job to them. And then you guys can ask any questions that you might have. So one of the things that surprises most people is how well trained we are. The training process to be a 911 call taker is very intense. So it took about 3 months from expressing interest through a website on the city of Raleigh. It took about 3 months for them to actually give me a start date. So there was a vision and hearing test, a drug test, a psych eval, and then many tests I had to take online to show whether I had a sense of direction on maps. So it was an exam where, they said, if you go north 2 blocks and west 3 blocks, what's the address you're at? And you had to look at a map, and it was timed, and you had to be able to prove that you had a sense of direction. Typing test, and then 2 or 3 interviews with employees who work there. So finally, I got a start date, and I had made it through all the phases. Then the first day there's 12 who come through training 3 times a year. So I met my other 11 classmates, and we were from all walks of life, all ages. And that launched a 3-month classroom training process. So there were tests every Friday. If you got anything under an 80, it was a fail. If you failed 2 tests, they asked you to leave. So that 3-month process was pretty nerve-wracking. I had not been in a classroom for a very long time, and the pass-fail process was pretty stressful, whether you were just out of college or the youngest person in my class was 21, the oldest was 58. I was 49 the time I was in the class, and we were all kind of scattered in the middle of that age range. We all made it. All 12 of us made it. Couple was teetering on the edge there of their second fail, but we only had a week left and they made it through. So that's very unusual that all 12 of us graduated. The second phase, so the things we learn in the classroom are all of the fire codes. We have codes that we use when there's ever a fire call. We have to basically have them all memorized. all the EMS codes. When someone calls in and says they have chest pain, I have to know what code that is, and it's a 10 Baker 9. And then the questions that I ask the caller on the other end of the line transfers into a code that ultimately dictates what we dispatch, how many units we dispatch, and how fast they go to that call. So all the fire codes, all the medical codes, all the Raleigh police codes, all the animal control codes, and all the forensic scientist codes, because we do dispatch forensic science units to crime scenes when they're needed. We have to know all those codes. Now, on my computer, I have various cheat sheets, so I can glance over and remind myself what the code is, but you can't go in not knowing, because you have to move quickly. We have to know all the geography for all of Wake County, all the major highways, all the major roadways, which roads change names and where. And again, there are maps that pop up that help us remind ourselves about those facts, but we have to have that pretty well nailed and have to take multiple geography tests. And then the software system that we use on the floor, we call it the 911 call taking floor, is the short word that we call it, is on the floor. So we have multiple computer screens at each console. One person works one console, and there's 8 computer screens, maps, codes, and then all the software. So you have to know everything before you get onto the floor. So we graduated, and then the next 3 months, I spent the time tethered to a supervisor. So we shared a headset. So I would take the call, we would be sitting next to each other, and if she had to mute me and speak over me, she could do that as I was training. So it's on the job training. That was 3 more months. Unfortunately, they gave me night shift. So I worked 6:30 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. as I trained with a very knowledgeable but very jaded person. It made it rough. And then trying to stay up all night was not so easy. Then I graduated from that. So when you graduate, there's a 2-day test that you take after you finish all of that. You have to pass them, can't get less than an 80. If you fail, they put you back on the floor for another couple sessions and then have you sit down and take the test again. Anyway, I made it through and sat down to take my first call on my own with no one tethered to me. And it was one of the scariest moments of my life. In fact, so much so that I'm one of the people involved in designing what we're going to call a phase 3 training, where you kind of have a mentor or a more senior call taker sitting next to you who's not training you, but can also just kind of give you the burst of, you did a good job with that. You might want to remember, you have to ask this question. There's so much to remember. It's very frustrating, but graduating from 6 months of training and then being on your own is, we say, it's like being dropped off a cliff. It's too terrifying. There has to be some little buffer in there. So we're designing that now. And I just went through a mentor training, and I will be one of Raleigh Wake's mentors. So I'm waiting for my first mentee, which I should get in 2 months. So just to tell you a little bit about calling 911, has anyone called 911 ever in here? You have. Oh, did you have a good experience?
The 911 operator was really good, but I was calling for somebody who I didn't have any information about any of her history.
Okay, that happens. Yeah, in fact, it happens quite a bit where someone will call 911 and it will route you to your local 911 call center automatically. And if you're on the phone with a relative who lives in Houston, Texas, and you're dialing 911, we can transfer you really, really quickly to anywhere in the world, to any other 911 call center in the world. Canada, the United States, and England, we all have the same standardized system. But yeah, we can get anyone to any 911 center. So if you're ever having an emergency and you think you are here and you can't do anything, you can always call 911 and ask, I've got to get to Kennebunk, Maine now, and we can get you there. We can transfer you to any 911 call center in the state of North Carolina. If it's outside of North Carolina, we have to give you a phone number, but we always make a follow-up call to that center to make sure that that's all come together. EMS calls, police calls, and fire calls that come in to us. we have to boil down to like a one-liner. And that's the first thing we type in the call. Someone calls in and says, there's a brush fire on the highway. We have to type brush fire on the highway, and then we have to get the location. That's one of the most serious things they train us about. The worst thing we can do is send help to the wrong location. It drains resources that are needed somewhere else, and it delays care for the people who really need it. So we do in Raleigh Wake what's called a 3 address or location verification. So if you ever do call, the first question we'll ask you is to repeat your address or tell me your location one more time. And as you're repeating your location, all the maps start to pull up, and hopefully everything aligns. I can see a cell phone ping on one map. I can pull up another map and type an address and see a more localized map. I can tell if it's residential. I can tell if it's a commercial buildings. I can tell if it's a highway. But making sure I nail down that location of where the patient or the emergency is one of the biggest things they train us on. And it's one of the biggest things we're written up about if we don't do that 3 address verification. So you call in with the location or the address, I ask you to repeat it, and then I repeat it back to you. And that all happens pretty seamlessly. Some people will get annoyed. Why am I saying this again? But we always try to say, I know you have an emergency. We got to make sure we're sending resources to the right location. Please be patient with me and just repeat the address one more time, so I know that I'm sending help to the right place. Some people don't know where they are. And when they don't know where they are, we do rely on our maps, and we will send help to the locations that I'm seeing on the maps. And we'll type in the call, address not verified, but location is showing to be here. And responders will go. We don't like to do that, but sometimes we have no choice. We've got to just rely on the maps. The technology is incredible. The cell phone pings are remarkable. If you call 911, I can see a blue dot on a map and I can see where your cell phone is. When we disconnect, it goes away. So I don't know what happens after that. So if you're really stuck and don't know your location, we do have a way to send help. If it's a medical call or a fire call, we do ask questions about the patient or the emergency. Every single question turns into a final determinant code, and that code dictates what my dispatchers send, what kind of help and how fast. High priority police calls that involve weapons or physical arguing or any kind of emergency, officers go lights and sirens. If lives are in danger or people are fighting or arguing, medical calls get coded out as omega, alpha, beta, Charlie, Delta, and Echo being the most serious. So Echo calls, everybody goes, police, fire, and EMS, and they go hot, lights and sirens. That's what we call it. Hot is lights and sirens, and cold is no lights and sirens. Raleigh Wake, I don't know if any of you read about it. I know my parents did, which I was impressed. My generation doesn't read the newspaper as much as y'all, but we are doing something in Raleigh Wake where we're trying to pull back on how often we send responders hot. A lot of car accidents happen, a lot of injuries happen because we're responding and people are driving so quickly. More accidents happen with first responders than I think people realize. So we're trying to think of the safety of the community out there who have nothing to do with the emergency. So they're trying to slow down and be really, really thoughtful about when to go hot. And right now we're saving that for Delta and Echo calls. They used to go hot for some Charlie calls, and they're starting not to do that. So trying to take their time a little bit and make sure that they are being safe and that they are considering the safety of the people driving around in the area. So loss of consciousness, breathing difficulty, those are our highest priority calls. And chest pain with difficulty breathing, and someone who is maybe thought to not be alive or be struggling for their life. Those are the hottest medical calls that we send. I know my dad always thought this part was interesting, so I'll tell you. Dean, will you look at my bag? There's like a card set in there. It's got a spiral binder. I'll show you guys what I do now that's all computerized, but used to look like, it's a smaller one. Anyway, if someone calls and says, I think my grandmother is dead, which is a call we get pretty often. Yeah, that's it. It's upsetting because they train us that there are certain adjectives that we need to hear in order to code that call correctly. And we have to have this memorized, and we took tests on it. You have to be stiff, cold, stiff and cold. I guess that's it. Or decomposing. If you don't say any of those things, we do not assume the person's dead. We don't. Blue, nope. Pale as a ghost, nope. That doesn't do it for us because there's still a potential way to save the life. So we'll go into CPR unless we hear those three adjectives. This person's got, anything that has to do with decomposition, stiff or cold. If they don't say any of those three words, we launch into CPR. And we've had people say, I don't think you understand. You're asking me to do CPR on a dead person. And we don't say, you didn't say one of the three words I need to hear. We just say, we need you to do this. You have to keep this patient alive. And sure enough, my dad always thought that part was interesting. And sure enough, I had a 19-year-old kid. He was in the lobby of his apartment building. And he was at the mailboxes. And he called me and said, there's a woman here and she's dead. And I said, tell me exactly what you're seeing. He said, she's sitting down on the step. She's holding her mail and her eyes are open and she's just sitting there like she's dead. So I didn't hear what I needed to hear. So I said, you got to get her flat on her back. We're going to start CPR. And he said, no, I don't think you understand. Like she's dead. So it went out as an echo call and those responders got there. And they got her flat on her back and they did save her life. I mean, she did have a pulse and they did transport her and they were able to save her. So time and time again, that those words, if we don't hear them spontaneously from the caller, so to us, the sort of water cooler joke is, are they dead or are they dead? Two different very things. And if you're just dead, you're probably not dead. So yeah, the death calls are the hardest. Any call involving a child that's sick, or injured, or God forbid, potentially injured and police need to go, are the hardest for all of us to digest. When we take those hard calls, they actually come in fewer and farther between than I think people realize. There's a lot of 911 calls that are pretty low priority. People call by accident. Their phones don't work. There's like an SOS button on the phone. They try to shut it down and they call by accident. Our recommendation for that, by the way, is if you ever do call 911 by accident, just stay on and tell us, I didn't mean to call you. If you just hang up, we have to make 2 attempts to call you back. And that takes sometimes 2-3 minutes away from another call that I could be taking. So we always remind people, just stay on and say, my phone just did something weird. I didn't mean to call you, because then we can just close out the call and move on. But we always make 2 attempts to call back. And sometimes every now and then, that second time we call back, sure enough, there's somebody whispering on the other line who's in trouble and needs help. So I'm glad we have that policy that make 2 attempts to call back on any 911 hang up call before you close it out. There's always the high priority calls are tough. There's more and more in place to take care of our mental health as call takers. The people who've been doing this forever sort of mock it a little bit. That's not how they grew up. They didn't have all these things. We now have in our big call center, we have 2 quiet rooms. There's a noise machine in there. You can play white noise. They used to have TVs in there. They took them out because that was not conducive to relaxing. But if you need to step off the floor and go into a quiet room, you're encouraged to do that after a tough call. In fact, we're all looking out for each other enough to say, even if someone does take a tough call, and there's, oh, I'm fine. Usually they're asked, like, just step off the floor for a minute, get some water. If you feel like you don't need that to cool down, you probably do. We have a porch that looks out over a pretty dumb parking lot at our call center, but we call it the mental health porch. So we'll stand on the porch, go into a quiet room, and then the big ad for last year, we had those big like massage chairs that lay back. So we have 2 of those now. So between the massage chairs and the quiet rooms and the mental health porch, we do get the chance to step away, and we didn't used to, that just didn't exist. We are recognized by the state of North Carolina as first responders, call takers, and dispatchers. We didn't used to be, and we're still fighting to be recognized as first responders by the federal government. So hopefully that will come. That just comes with more benefits and more acknowledgement that what we do is important. I mean, most people who do my job would say no one would know where to go or what to do if it wasn't for us. Of course, we're first responders. So that debate is still out there in the world, is how recognized are we as call takers and dispatchers behind computer screens as first responders? Does anyone know any first responders? You have any family members or friends you do? What do they do?
I have a cousin who's an EMT.
Okay, a cousin who's an EMT.
I had a question for you.
Okay, okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. EMTs, yeah. So if you know a first responder, please thank them for what they do. The way a lot of us see it is I can hear and report everything that I'm hearing on the phone into the notes of the call. First responders who read those notes and go into what I think I'm describing, it's pretty astonishing. Some of the scenes and the settings that these first responders walk into and put themselves into to save lives and help people. We do the best we can to describe it. You know, people are screaming, someone's saying they have a gun. I mean, we're reporting all of that. So officers go in and know what they're headed into. Complete chaos, multiple people screaming, yelling, someone's yelling if they have a gun, and then they disconnect. So all of the notes that we can type in there to get the responders ready are really, really, really important. And we have to ask about weapons, and we have to be telling them what we're hearing. So you become really reliant on your sense of hearing. I remember when I was training at night with my supervisor, she would say, "Did you hear that in the background?" And I thought she was nuts. I'm like, "What? I didn't hear that." And you get really, really good. That sense, when you realize how important it is, gets pretty honed. Like now I can hear things that I know I didn't used to hear. That are relevant and important for the first responders. The only thing too that I always tell people whenever I talk to them is if, you know, I'm sure you all maybe don't think you'd ever need 911, maybe you won't, I hope you don't, but one of the best, most helpful, amazing things is when people have a hide-a-key somewhere on their property. Responders will direct responders to the pink rock under the flower pot, under the second window in the backyard. And they'll go and they'll follow everything that we say to describe how to get in. A lot of those are fall calls. You know, people fall and they can't quite get up. Or they crawl to the phone, but can't get any farther. And if we have no choice, we will break the door down to get to the patient. The fire department will do that, but we do everything we can to avoid it. But it's always a relief when someone says, "Yes, I have a hide-a-key," and they tell us exactly, doesn't matter how complicated the instructions are, we'll get them to the hide-a-key and they'll unlock the door and come in and help anyone. Or if we get a 911 hang-up call a couple times from the same address, we'll send a police officer out there to check on it. And it's always helpful when we can pop in notes in there if there's a way to gain access to the house, or the neighbor has a key, or daughter has a key who lives nearby and can be there in 5 minutes. So have a hide-a-key. Tell the people you love to have a hide-a-key somewhere on their property. It makes it easier for us to get in if you ever need assistance. And then I'll tell you a couple calls and then I'll stop. Well, should I tell your favorite one about the motorcyclist, I guess? All right, this is one of my dad's favorite calls. So we are allowed to share calls. We can't use any personal information, obviously, but the general story of any call is okay for us to share. I had a caller, call in, a female, she said, I just drove my car through an intersection and I hit a motorcycle. And there was a male on the motorcycle, and I can't tell where he went. His bike went sliding across the intersection. My eyes followed the bike, and I'm looking all over. I can't find him. I don't know where he is. So I typed this in. It's a pretty serious call when any vehicle hits like a pedestrian or a motorcycle. So everybody went, and sure enough, I start hearing over the radios, the fire department says, there's no patient anywhere in sight. So nearby, there was a gully that went down into a ravine. It seemed pretty far-fetched that he could have ended up in the gully when the bike was across the intersection, but the fire department got all their gear out and they went down in there looking for the patient, still couldn't find the patient. So the dispatchers were all confused. The police officers were out there, and the woman, she said, I know he had a green helmet on, and I don't know where he went. So sure enough, about 5 or 6 minutes later, we get another call that went to another call taker sort of near me. So you hear each other take calls. And the caller said, I just came out to my garage. I live in a retirement community that has an enclosed garage. And I came out to my car to go to the grocery store, and there's a man lying on the roof of the car next to my car with a green helmet on. And we kind of put the pieces together. I said, Kyle, did you say you had a green helmet? She said, yeah. He said, is this related to your motorcycle accident? So we get on the radio, the dispatchers talk to the fire department. They said, we just found a male with a green helmet. He's unconscious on the roof of a car about 4 blocks down from where you are. So they all went speeding down there. And sure enough, what happened was, as they pieced it together, and they were actually talking about this, usually we don't get to hear the whole story. We dispatch and we're on to the next thing. But she had hit the motorcycle, and the driver flew up onto another car and hit the roof. And that car carried him home to their retirement home. They didn't even know that anyone was on their roof. So they got out and went into their apartment. Someone else came down to get in the car next to that car and found this man. Anyway, they put the whole thing together, and he became conscious and he was fine. He had a concussion, but they told him this whole crazy story. Like, you were hit 5 blocks up the road and we just found you here. Anyway, we did get because he was okay and had a concussion, and he had a good laugh about it himself. That was one of our strange stories. But every now and then we piece stories together as we're getting calls from different perspectives. Like, wait, my call is related to your call. So that was one of the happier endings of a kind of a wacky story, especially when the fire department was like, we're down in this gully and there is no patient down here. How could someone hit a man on a motorcycle and he disappears? This makes no sense. They thought he went running off. They're searching the whole area and they couldn't find him. And then we finally figured out what happened. But yeah, there's always good calls. There's always annoying calls. We've got some frequent flyer people who call for no reason. I don't know. They think we're their friends or something, and they never have an emergency. They just want to call and report something that makes us a little crazy. It's usually, noise complaints from the same person, and the laundry list of history is like, you just have to scroll and scroll and scroll. But it's part of our job, is to deal with the frequent flyers who are irritated by something that is sort of an emergency. And then animal control calls, those are always make it interesting and light. People do call when they have snakes around. I would call, I think, if I saw a snake too, but we won't come out if there's a snake outside your property, but they do get into your house, and then we will come. And then the worst call I heard was this guy called, and he swore it was a copperhead, got into his house, slithered across the floor, and went into a closet. So animal control went out there and they said, we tore apart this entire closet. We have moved every piece of furniture. We cannot find this snake. And they left. And I thought, I don't know how that guy's going to sleep in his house tonight, but they never found that snake. So I guess that happens too. So yeah, if you guys have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. I'm, again, impressed that the training is as intense as it is. I hope you guys have more faith. If you ever do call 911, you're not just getting some person who's answering the phone and pushing a couple buttons. You're actually getting someone who is CPR certified and, very, very well trained. So please have confidence if you ever call 911 that you're talking to someone who knows what they're doing.
Okay, thank you very much for a great talk.
Oh, and this is just to show you, this is all computerized now, but our computers do go down. And these are the card sets. We still call them cards, but this is the medical one. There's a fire one and a police one. But this is how they did in the old days. They would call and flip through this book, and depending on how you answered, they would flip to these different tabs and do exactly what we do now on a computer screen. But we still rely on these. We have to have these at all times in case and it does happen where the computer system will glitch. It usually only lasts like 15 or 20 seconds, but we have to use backup card sets. But if any of you guys want to look at this, you can.
That would be great for show and tell. What we're going to do
Okay.
is have a brief break, our commercial break. We got 2 baskets here. The money that we collect now in these baskets actually goes towards ethical action efforts. So that's a little bit of a change. And when we do question and answers, it's a standard thing. Please raise your hand. If you have a lot of questions to ask, let other people ask questions also. Did I leave anything out? I think that's mostly it. Don't be too horribly long-winded. And so we will hand this back. You're back.
Okay.
How large is your center? And it's from just Wake County? How many people are there, and how long are your shifts now? You were doing 12-hour shifts. Do you do 12 hours, and how many hours a week?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do 12-hour shifts if you're a dispatcher. If you're a call taker like me, you do 10-hour shifts. We used to do 12-hour shifts, but there was some recent research that showed pretty strongly that the compassion, the patience, it falls off somewhere between hour 10 and hour 12. So they backed 2 hours off and added those extra 2 days a month to our schedule. And I'm actually glad they did that, because I do think 12 hours of just doing nothing but call taking is too much. So I would say our call center is probably the size of this room. And then the fire consoles are in one corner, police consoles are another. The call takers are sort of scattered around the room. And then we've got a little kitchen area, but we can't safely man that call center with fewer than 14 people. And 14 is not ideal. So we usually want 18 to 20 people working. Some dispatcher channels, depending on how busy they are, will also take calls between the radio traffic. So the dispatchers listen to the radios and they tell the officers where to go and what to do, or EMS or fire where to go and what to do. So some of those channels that are less busy, they'll have to take a call, and you get hit with a call whenever it comes in, because the computers you just hear it in your ear. It's not like you're answering a phone. All of a sudden you're like, oh, I wasn't ready for that, but here it comes. So dispatchers will dispatch and take calls. And then if you're a call taker like me, you only take calls, and it's 10 hours. And by that 9th hour, it's brutal. You're just wanting to go. The schedule is like a nursing schedule. So it's, 2 days on, 3 off, 2 on, 1 off. It's wacky. So every other week is now the same. So I work 6 out of 7 days 1 week, 2 out of 7 days the following week, 6 out of 7 days, 2 out of 7 days. So it flip flops. So I have an easy week and what we call hell week. And I'm just finished hell week today. So I have 2 days. I work 2 days next week.
Hi, I'd like to go back to the lady at the mailbox with her mail in her hand.
Yeah.
So are you trained to give someone verbal instructions on CPR?
Yes.
Or evaluating the patient? I mean, that person obviously didn't know whether the woman was having a petit mal seizure,
Right,
or
right.
stroke, or
Right.
he didn't know how to take her pulse or something. So
Right.
so he wasn't willing to do
No.
any of that.
No. He said, ma'am, you're not understanding what I'm saying. I'm telling you she's dead. And I said, sir, you need to get her flat on her back. We need to start chest compressions. we don't ask people what they think. We instruct them what to do. And he still refused, and the fire department got there so fast that they did it.
Well, she was
And
lucky.
I know we were actually grateful that the guy who called me was there, watched the whole thing and saw like, see, she has a pulse and we're transporting her. So hopefully that was a lesson he'll never forget. Yeah.
The call takers all have CPR instruction. They have to pass the test, so
Yeah.
they know how to instruct somebody to do it.
Yeah, that was a full day class on CPR, how to use an AED machine. We've got software now tied into the computers that show us where the AED machine. So if you call me from like a commercial building, it'll tell me there's an AED machine on the lobby floor of this building, and I can tell the caller, you have an AED machine in the lobby of that building, go get it. That's getting better. It's still not great, but every AED machine is ideally registered with us. We're still working on that. But yeah, I'm certified to give CPR and then certified to instruct someone over the phone how to do it. Oh, AED, you're going to ask me what that stands for. I took that test. Automatic external defibrillator. I think you're right. Yeah. And it's a box and you take it apart. It actually talks to you. And it tells you there are 2 stickers in there. There's actually scissors to cut a shirt off, a razor to shave like hair, and then you're supposed to shave the hair right under where the stickers go. Otherwise, it will burn the patient a little bit. If there's no time, we have them just stick the stickers on there, and then you hit a button on the machine, and it'll jump the chest. I think it has like 2 or 3 shocks in there that it'll deliver. But yeah, we're certified in everything, and then we're trained how to tell someone else to do it over the phone. But yeah, first we had to learn how to be certified ourselves before we learned how to instruct people how to do it.
What happens when you get a suicide call? The person says, I'm thinking of killing myself.
So the mental health calls that we do receive are, everyone agrees since the pandemic, have gone up in how often we get them. We always send police to a suicide call. And if whoever's calling us thinks that they need an ambulance, we'll send an ambulance as well. We do have a pilot program right now where there are 3 crisis counselors who sit on the floor with us now. So it used to be there's a mental health card in here. So I would go through some questions, have you done anything to hurt yourself? Does the person have any weapons? Are they safe right now? But while we were waiting for responders to get to them, we were sort of told, well, you got to keep them on the phone and you got to think of something to talk to them about. And a lot of us didn't know how to do that. So now we have crisis counselors. We transfer them to a crisis counselor who's across the floor from me, and they'll go through their whole thing. And that's been great. I know we're trying to mimic Durham. Durham has crisis counselors who are actually in the field with the officers, and they'll put vests on and they'll be in the field with the officers, and they'll go to suicide callers. So yeah, the mental health card always has a police officer that goes with that ambulance. And if it's just a straight suicide threat, it's a police call. But that caller, or even the family member of the caller, whoever's with the caller, will get a crisis counselor who actually knows what to say and how to walk them through the minutes leading between when they're done with me and when someone arrives to help. But we are getting more and more of them, and we're all grateful to have the crisis counselors on the floor with us. It's only been the last few months we've had that, and ideally they'll be in the field someday like they do in Durham.
So, first of all, I really appreciate the job that you all do, especially because I've experienced it not too long ago when I had to call in.
Yeah.
I will say, I'm imagining the person who answered the call that I gave got written up because
Okay.
she did not ask for the actual address.
Oh,
And I was at the Wake County SPCA, and it's like 200 Pathfinder Lane, which you go here, you go here.
yep.
And we heard the ambulance for about 5 minutes. And so one of our animal care people who was still there went and flagged them down because they couldn't find where we were,
Oh,
which was just scary.
that's terrible.
But that's actually not my question.
Okay.
The question is, I have got a friend who lives in Durham
Mhm.
who a few months back had to call 911 for her husband, and there was no answer.
Oh.
And I wondered what feedback you might have about that.
I know Durham is it Durham, did you say? I know they're extremely understaffed. Raleigh was for a while. We're finally fully staffed. The pandemic did a number on everybody, like everywhere else. We've actually had that problem where we've called to transfer to Durham and we've had nobody on the line. And I mean, if we have to send an ambulance to another county, we will actually do it. But yeah, usually if we hang up, call again, at some point, the computer system will find a person, but that's terrible. That's terrible. We do, when we get massive overflow, it's called overflow mode, where you can just see the switchboard lit up. And it's usually because one thing has happened and many people are there and they all call. So in the old days, before everyone had cell phones, someone had to run to a phone and call, and you might have a high priority incident and 5 calls about it. And now you have the littlest thing like a fender bender in an intersection, and every single person who's passing by is calling from their cell phone. So we go into overflow sometimes for not a good reason. Just it's a congested area and everyone's calling in. I don't know if they're injured, but there's 2 cars and they're smashed up against each other. Airbags went off. Yes, we understand. Do you have any information about any patients? No, I have to disconnect. So we're trying to prevent from getting into overflow. But when that does happen, there's a recording that says, we are in overflow. Please stay on the line. Someone will be with you shortly. Yeah, that's terrible. That's terrible. Those kind of things like turn my stomach. I don't like that. But I do know Durham's understaffed. I don't know why, but they're not quite as big as we are. The neighboring county is as big as we are, as Charlotte, Mecklenburg, but they don't dispatch as many entities as we do. So we're sort of this anomaly, ginormous center. I think it's broken up. It's like they have fire and EMS come out of one center and then police calls come out of a different center. They're not all a big conglomerate like we are. So I think it's something like, if this is a medical call, push 1, and then it'll route you. If this is a police call, push 2. It's like some call centers are set up like that. So you're routing yourself. We just answer everything, because we dispatch everybody from where we are in Wake County. Another question I get a lot is like hospitals. In Raleigh, we try to get any patient to any hospital they ask to go to. And I've heard in Chatham that that's not true. I don't know. Someone at the last time I talked said, no, they'll take you to the closest hospital, no exceptions. But in Raleigh, Wake, we'll take people to Durham or Chatham County, or if they want to go to UNC in Chapel Hill, they do try to accommodate. They can't always do it, but they do try. But I've heard that's not the case in Chatham.
So I wanted to fact check my cousin, the EMT.
Yeah.
Because we have a family house that is only occupied in the summer as a vacation house. And we've had a landline there for years. And we finally have gotten rid of the landline, except we're paying to keep the ability to call 911. And my cousin, the EMT, said that it's better to call from a landline because the location's really precise.
Yes.
Whereas if it's a cell phone, they don't necessarily know. Is that accurate?
That is very true. Yeah. All landlines are hardwired into their local 911 center. Everything comes up when I get a landline call. It's dreamy. It's like the person's name, their address, which like provider. Everything fills up when it's a landline. There's just not that many of them anymore. With the cell phone, every now and then it'll hit a tower instead of your address. And then that's why I'm asking to repeat the address. And you don't have that issue with a landline. You never have to worry about it bouncing off a tower. I can see the tower it's bouncing off of, but I can't see the address. Sometimes that happens with cell phone signals. So yes, landlines are heaven for us.
When we first got a cell phone, and maybe it was just a touch phone, and moved down here with a 919 area code, several times, stutter stepped and pressed 911.
Yeah.
I can't remember whether I called, hung up, and either called back to say this is not a call, or
Yeah.
got called to say it wasn't true.
Yeah, the 919 area code throws everybody. Every now and then it'll just stick. And then what's funny is I can always tell it's an accidental dial because they dial the rest of the numbers, and then they put the phone to the ear and I'm like, did you mean to call me? And they're like, who's this? I said, this is 911. They're like, oh my gosh, I hit 911 instead of 919. It happens all the time, all the time. But yeah, just if you stay on and tell us it's an accident, it's easy enough to deal with. But some people get scared and they hang up. And then we're like, no, now I have to make sure you're not having an emergency.
I have a question.
Okay.
Mike Runner's priority here. How does legal liability work? I assume it's very similar to like police or fire people.
Yes.
In terms of that, how does that work?
Yeah. So they're like Good Samaritan laws protect us. And so does this, like with all this priority dispatch. This came out of England. England's system is 999. And our system is exactly the same as 999. And it's been, I should know how long it's been in existence, but if we follow that protocol and we ask every question exactly the way it's worded, which we're trained to do, we are also protected by that entity that accredits us.
Okay.
So we are pretty, I mean, unless they can prove that the call taker is purposely doing something negligent or horrible, which we'd be fired in a second if that happened. It's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to get, you have to prove like extreme negligence or something, which is really difficult to do, but that protects us, that accreditation. And they do that every 2 years. I think they go through all of our calls randomly. We're also graded on calls to keep up with that accreditation. So we have a whole department of people that pulls calls for court cases or whatever is needed. 911 calls are public record. Y'all can ask for any 911 call you want. It's all public record. So there's a department of people pulling calls and they'll email it to you, I think. And then there's another department that grades our calls. So they sit in an office and randomly get calls that come through our center at random, and they have to grade how well we followed that. It makes no difference to the caller because help is coming. But if I ask 2 questions out of order, they'll write me up for it. You can't ask that before you ask this. You've been trained how to do that. And then I'm like, okay, now I know. So we're constantly being trained and retrained about, and that's to protect us from exactly what you're saying, like lawsuits and stuff. So that's, I think, why the training is so intense, is to protect from liability.
Yeah, the training's kind of amazing. I actually work the polls at Wake County, and depending on which job you have, every single job when you're working the polls has flow charts. So even people who think they know everything are still always, every time, follow the flow chart.
Yep.
But regardless of that, when you said that, you all will send people to whatever hospital they want.
Yeah.
There are limits to that, because when my mother-in-law passed out and conked her head on the back of her head on the bathroom floor, and my father-in-law told him he wanted to go to Duke Raleigh, they're like, we've got to take you to Wake Med because Duke Raleigh's not a trauma center. So that's
true. Right. The EMS unit will know all of that. We keep track. Hospitals, emergency rooms can go on what we call red diversion or yellow diversion. If they're on green, it means that they're accepting anyone and everyone. When they go on yellow, it means we might need to make some exceptions. And if they're on red diversion, it means they're not admitting anyone into that ER. They're only allowed to be on red diversion for up to 2 hours. They have to figure out how to come off because we have too many patients coming. But they can go on red diversion for all kinds of reasons. I mean, if they bring a patient in who's got some communicable disease that they just figured out that they had, and now suddenly everyone's got to mask up and they've got to disinfect the entire emergency department, that happens. I mean, there's stories of like bugs coming off of people that are like, this is so toxic, we have to go on red and shut everything down and keep everybody safe. It's like a hazmat situation. So when they clear themselves, they come off of red and then we can admit patients. So we always tell people, we'll do everything we can to get you to Wake Med if that's where you want to go. But the EMT working and who gets to your house will be able to tell you if you can go there. And if they're on red, they have to reroute them because nobody wants to go into an ER that's on red. Because the reasons they go on red are pretty gross. Like, I don't want to go there.
So I feel like this is a silly question, but how is it that anyone, anywhere in the US can dial 919? And now that we have cell phones, we could be in a whole other state.
Mhm.
How is that geography handled that it goes to the right place?
It's interesting because every now and then I will get a call from somebody who's in a completely bizarre, like in Colorado. And I'm like, where are you calling me from? Because it doesn't even come up on my map. And like, I'm calling 911. And I said, where are you? Because I'm not seeing you on my map. Like, oh, I'm in Colorado. And they have a 919 number from many years back. And for some reason, it gets to me. Not every time, not everyone with a 919 number gets to me. It should ideally route you to the exact 911 center that is in your territory from wherever you're using the phone. But every now and then it just does something weird. So then I'm like, well, let me give you the emergency number to Colorado so that you can get to your 911. So it usually works where the cell phone will go to the closest call center from where you are. And every now and then it just doesn't for some reason. So we have to be ready for that too.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Do you see a role for AI in the kind of work you do? Because it seems like it could be a tremendous help.
Yeah.
As long as it was well supervised.
Yes. We just had that company that makes those books and accredits us just did my mentor training last week. And they are rolling out a training to help new call takers process calls, and it's all an AI computer. So, and it's all random. And they played us an example of it, and it's pretty good. I mean, it sounds like a robotic voice, which who cares? But the guy says, I'm having chest pain. And then you say, like, you speak to it, what is your address? And they'll make up an address, but there's this delay in it that's super frustrating. Or the mock patient won't hear you, and then they don't answer. So we were trying it out last week, but that's their hope, is that they roll out this AI training tool where a new call taker is going through mock scenarios with an AI human who's mimicking everything that could ever happen. But we were all kind of like, we're almost impressed with this, but it's getting there. It is getting there. And there are thoughts that someday an AI will run the entire call center.
Well, that.
Yeah.
Actually, I was more referring to, rather than just training,
Yeah.
in terms of being able to, because a lot of what you're doing is sort of formulaic in the sense you have
Yep.
certain questions you have to ask next based on incoming information.
Yeah.
And it
We
seems
have-
to me it could be a tremendous help.
Yes, it is. And we do have an auto dispatch component to our job. So if it's a chest pain call, the auto dispatch will recommend this is what needs to happen. You need an ALS unit, advanced life support, and a fire truck, and it'll auto dispatch. But someone's got to check it because it doesn't. It's still a little scary. Like,
Yeah.
we're like, oh, and so there's humans there, thank goodness, to be like, well, that auto dispatch was great. It worked great. And then other times like, whoa, what just happened? And then they have to call off units. Right? I know. But we always say, someday we're not going to have a job. The whole call center is going to be some AI ginormous set of computers, and you're not going to need a human. But right now, what we're seeing is, thank God we're all here kind of watching what is sort of starting to happen, because there's a lot of mistakes, But yeah, someday it might be that there's no human doing this job.
I get a lot of robocalls and they're AI, and
Yeah.
I often ask them, are you a human being or are you AI? And if I don't get an answer, I'll hang up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that supplanting real people with AI
Mhm.
in a situation where people are really in distress
Right.
is probably a mistake.
Right. I agree. I mean, I think about we also talked about hysterical callers. I just don't see how an AI computer could help us, someone who's hysterical, whereas we're trained how to say, I understand, I know you're upset. I hear, concentrate on my voice for a minute. Listen to what I'm telling you. Okay. Try to take a breath, focus on what I'm saying. I'm going to help you until help can get there. I just don't see how an AI computer could do that and calm the patient down on the other end. So make it more frustrated, right? Like, you guys stop talking to me, you stupid
It's
computer.
hard enough to call 911 when you don't know everything that dispatcher wants to know, the call person. If it were an AI, I think I would have hung up on it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. But there is a role for it. There, I mean,
Yeah.
I just don't. Yeah, in training for now, that's what they're working on. But the instructor went through, he's like, look how cool this is. And he went through it's like, this guy says, hi, I'm having chest pain. And so he's like, okay, so then you go through the computer, you do 10 Baker 9, and then you ask the question, are you home alone? There's this pause. We're like, anyway, the guy's like, it's getting there. We're like, okay, well.
I like the idea of AI as training.
Yeah, me too.
I think that we have filled our questions and then a little bit
Okay.
more. So thank you, Stephanie, so much for your talk.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me. The other thing I'll tell you too is if you ever questions about Chatham County or how the 911 center works, you can Google, there's a non-emergency number for every county on top of 911, but you can always call the non-emergency number for Chatham County. If you ever have questions, like, I'm just curious, how does this work? How does that work? If I ever need to call EMS or if I ever need a bandage change because my aunt's visiting who had surgery, how does this work? We're all there to answer questions like that all day long. So don't hesitate to ever just pick up and dial a non-emergency number if you just have general questions about things.
Thank you so much. That was an awesome talk and great responses to questions. So if we could have one more little round of applause.